Our support to thematic bonds is really about solving the long-term financing needs for the continent. The continent requires quite a lot of funding to be able to meet its developmental priorities.
We need finance to flow into things like renewable energy. We need finance to flow into things like affordable housing. And we know that we cannot do that using the typical finance mechanisms that sometimes not crowding the capital at scale as we'd like to. And so thematic bonds really make sense to us.
Africa is at a point in time where it can actually offer solutions to the world. It has an abundance of natural resources, it has a youthful population, it has a lot of energy potential, so it can actually invest a lot in renewable energy. It can be part of the solution for the climate change.
From the Africa Climate Summit, there was a big push for finance to be crowded in at scale, and green bonds provides one of those solutions.
We supported $1.1 billion of green bonds, but green bonds account for slightly less than 0.2% of the global green bonds issued globally. Yeah, so it's a very small share for Africa. So definitely want to see more green bonds being issued in the continent, and we're going to be supporting that. But in addition to that, there are other thematic bonds that can also be part of the financing mix. So we want to expand the menu of the financing available, the financing instruments available. That's why we call it Beyond Green Bonds.
The very first one that we did in Kenya was the Econ Green Bond, which I think was really, really successful because it made affordable housing available to students.
If you look at, for instance, the Econ Green Bond, the diversity in the investor base, you have international investors, you have local investors, and even from a local investor perspective, you got commercial banks in there, you got pension schemes in there, you got insurance companies and reinsurance companies. So I think if you look at that, what you raise in terms of the quantum and also the investor distribution, that is our defined success in the issuance of a green bond.
The impacts that we've had of going green beyond the financial bits for the organization is just being able to integrate ESG in totality, into how we do business. And for us, one of the greatest impacts has been through our supply chain, how we work with our contractors and how we work with our suppliers. And then also through our properties to be able to create communities, because a green bond enabled us to scale the business. And so we have all these properties across Nairobi, and we are creating communities where our young people are able to learn and provide better opportunities for them.
We supported Access Bank in Nigeria to raise their first green bond, the first corporate green bond that was issued in Africa. Part of the proceeds that were raised went to build embankments to protect the city of Lagos, which is very prone to flooding and all that. So you can see how it kind of links very directly to the developmental needs and the climate challenges that the city and the continent faces. Another transaction that I can say has stood out is on the transport sector. So we supported ONCF in Morocco. They raised a relatively large size of a transaction, about $95 million equivalent in local currency, for the electrification of the railway system. And again, it's a big promise that we can actually raise long-term financing to electrify our transportation system, because transport is a very big emitter across the continent and also globally. And then in Tanzania, we have supported NNB Bank, CRDB Bank on very large transactions. Tanzania doesn't have a very large institutional investor base, so most of the investors in those instruments have been retail. And the money is actually going to support a number of companies ranging from agriculture, renewable energy, transportation. So it's actually building the development of the country.
So working closely with the Sustainalytics and the Climate Bonds Initiative with the help of West Africa, we were able to identify the key 6 elements that enable us to issue the green bond.
Our relationship with FSD Africa dates back in 2021, when we were really trying to get into the sustainable financing world and trying to come up with the gender bond. So they really came handy, particularly within the capital markets department. They helped us with the technical input in how to develop the social bond framework, which ultimately was received a second party opinion by Sustainalytics in and allowed us to issue the first gender bond in sub-Saharan Africa. Since we've managed to mobilize $32 million in 2022 and fully disbursed it by December, we have seen the impact in terms of our gender bonds. We have managed to issue loans to women-owned businesses, SMEs, and micro and small medium enterprises for over 3,000 women.
We've supported a number of transactions in the renewable energy space. One Watt Solar is a case that stands for me in that category. It's a transaction we supported in Nigeria for an SME company, and they issued the first green sukuk instrument in Africa. That stood out for me because the nature, the size of the transaction was relatively small, and the fact that we were able to raise money from the capital markets for small entities like that was actually quite interesting. So we've gone to support a number of other transactions, the same sector, Evolt in Mauritius.
ENL Group is a Mauritian conglomerate operating in 6 sectors, including real estate, agribusiness, commerce and industry, tourism, logistics, and financial services. Our subsidiary Envolt, specializing in renewable energy development, recently concluded its first green project bonds offering of $11 million. The proceeds will support the construction of 13 new solar facilities across the island, with a combined capacity of 14 megawatts. Thanks to the technical expertise of FSD Africa, Envolt has developed a green bond framework that will allow the company to maintain its development pace.
And we know that in Africa we have more than 600 million people who need access to power, especially in the rural areas. So we're supporting issuers who are in the mini-grid space. That's actually addressing a developmental need in the continent. In Kenya, there's one small transaction we have supported, which I think I'm very proud of. This is Ban Manufacturing. They're in the clean cooking space. So they raised about $10 million to support green cooking stoves. And they are operating across a number of countries in Africa. In fact, the money that was raised in Kenya is going to be partly used to build a factory in Nigeria.
So Africa is leading the charge in so many different ways for climate technologies. And so we've just listed our bond, which is, we're seeing already interest in that we're going to utilize in order to continue research and design and capacity building for our cook stoves that are revolutionizing cooking.
We strongly believe that demonstration is very, very important because it supports replication. So when Econ issued their first green bond here, I know there are a number of potential issuers, even in Zambia, who have approached us to say, we want to do something similar to what Econ did. When we supported NNB Bank to issue their first gender bond, we have seen interest from a number of banks in Nigeria wanting to do the same. In fact, we had a gender bond workshop in Nigeria. NNB Bank was present there, was invited to share their lessons.
Using capital markets for raising funding, first of all, it gives you a diversified investor base, and that way it means that you're not only relying on one particular lender or one particular investor, but secondly, it also shows your commitment to the funds that you have mobilized and how you're going to utilize them. Because with the capital markets, particularly with thematic bonds, you have the responsibility to report back on how you've used the funds.
Okay, the total green bond, the value is $300 million, but our first tranche in Tanzanian shillings is 40 billion Tanzanian shillings. That is equivalent to around 22 million US dollars. So by the time that we are going to the market with our green bond, we came to realize that that's the largest ticket ever in sub-Saharan Africa. It was oversubscribed by more than 400%.
So we are looking for opportunities for co-investment between international pools of capital and domestic pools of capital. So during the Africa Climate Summit here in Nairobi, we curated the Pan-Africa Fund Managers Association, which brings a number of fund manager associations from Kenya, from Nigeria, from Ghana, from Morocco, from Uganda, from Botswana, and we're expanding the list. That list is growing every day. We want to use that platform as a way of engaging the industry and saying, look, as an industry, as a financial sector industry, as a fund management industry, we are ready to invest in a manner that does not just generate investment returns for us, but also has development impacts for the communities and for the countries in which those pools of capital have been mobilized from.
We appreciate that we can do more issuance of green bonds, but there are many other opportunities. We need to be thinking of inclusive finance holistically. What are the other opportunities that need us to think of new ways to get finance to flow into them?